Hi, I'm Ibby, and you're listening to Kill the Cat. Today we're talking about Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone and how it builds an immersive world for its audience. Spoilers ahead, but at this point, it's kind of your own fault if you haven't seen it. Enjoy the episode. Alrighty, we are about to talk about Harry Potter. Now, Kat.
Yes.
How heavily did you go down the Potter fandom rabbit hole?
I didn't have a Pottermore, but apart from that, pretty far.
Okay.
Pretty far. So yeah, I've been into Harry Potter since I was very young. Just give away my age. We had all the books on tape.
Oh wow.
Read by Stephen Fry. They were amazing. And whenever we went on road trips, my parents would put the tapes in the car and we'd listen to Harry Potter. And it got to the point where we end like an 8-hour day of driving and we wouldn't want to get out the car because we'd want more Harry Potter. So I know them very, very well.
Yeah. Yeah, my introduction was a little bit more interesting. I grew up in quite a religious household, so yes. I had to read number 1 for school, and my parents were not happy about that. But then I didn't get to read any of the other books until I was in high school. Yeah.
Okay.
And sort of family situation changed, so we were okay with it. And at that point, I read the first book, watched the first 4 movies, and then read the books as they came out. I didn't quite get into the fandom. I know my wife did very much. She had the Pottermore account, I think. She was a Slytherin.
I'm also a Slytherin.
Oh, hello.
What is your house?
I have no idea. I don't know.
I think you're a Hufflepuff or a Gryffindor.
I don't know. How do you decide these things?
It's what traits you value. So I'm a Slytherin because I value ambition. Like, I don't think I'm evil.
No.
I'm part of this whole
Slytherin
Renaissance.
doesn't mean
yes.
you're evil.
It does in this first movie, but
yeah, but you know,
kind of.
The first movie is very broad themes.
Yes, but I value ambition and hard work and cunning in that kind of way. And then it's what you value. So Gryffindors value bravery, Ravenclaws value curiosity about the world, Hufflepuffs value like loyalty and kindness.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice.
So I feel like you're somewhere between a Hufflepuff and a Gryffindor.
I'd say that's accurate.
Yeah.
Although I feel like I jump around. But I think this raises an interesting point. The fact that we can have this conversation. Yes. Because something that J.K. Rowling did with the Harry Potter series, and we're going to be talking mostly about the first movie, not the book, because we just kind of had to cap it at like, what are we actually talking about? Because the series is massive, the fandom is massive. You just can't address everything.
We are a movie podcast, so we will be focusing mostly on the movie.
I think it's a real testament to how popular this got as how well the world was built. The first movie especially.
So one of the amazing things about this fandom is that people want to be part of this world, but they don't even want to, well, obviously they do, but it's not about going on the adventures or meeting the characters or being the characters. They just want to go to school. Yeah, they just want to go to Hogwarts.
Which, getting kids to want to go to a school, that's amazing.
They just want to have their wand. They want to go to Diagon Alley and Hogsmeade. And that's amazing. I honestly haven't really heard of many other fandoms that do that. Maybe Star Wars, maybe Lord of the Rings. Yeah,
but I feel like they're so far in the fantasy genre that as much as you want to engage with the fandoms, I think there's a sense that Harry Potter is a lot closer to our world. It could be real. Like, every child who read the books before they were 11 years old, on their 11th birthday, they were waiting for their Hogwarts.
I was totally one of those children. I was so disappointed.
I was 11 when I read the books, so I'd missed the mark. But yeah, I think that's something that, for me, is one of the things that is really well done, is that it's a world that could be ours, right? Like,
it could be real. And like, you want it to be real. Yeah.
Yeah, and totally, you want it to be real and you want to engage with it. So why don't we talk a little bit about sort of some of the techniques that we used in the world building for this, some of the things that I guess we think that J.K. Rowling kind of nailed. Did J.K. Rowling do the script for this movie?
She didn't. Steve Kloves.
Good job, Steve. Although I have read that there was a lot of sort of interaction with J.K. Rowling just around how the world was built and details that were added.
And he wrote all of them except Order of the Phoenix.
Okay, interesting. I guess for me, one of the things it really does well is it just opens really strongly. And it opens in a way where it makes us ask questions and it hints towards more. Yes. And I think my title for this point is Hint Towards More. So the opening scene of the movie, it's the 3 minutes and like 48 seconds And that includes the little Harry Potter logo that comes up at the end of this scene. But we're introduced to Dumbledore, who sucks in all the lights with his Deluminator. We're introduced to McGonagall, who's a cat. We're introduced to Hagrid, and we're introduced to baby Harry Potter as he's left on Dursley's doorstep. There's some conversation that happens. Dumbledore mentions that there's these rumours that are true, both good and bad. And so in this short scene, we're given a whole bunch of questions to ask, or at least things that we kind of know. We're not given the information about them. So we know that there is another world that is secret and is hidden from the people like us, who they call muggles. We know that this world has some use for professors. We know that this world is somewhat magical. It isn't just like our classic tropes of magic, but it mixes those, the cats and the wizard robes and the owls with things like a flying motorcycle and this weird little gadget that sucks in lights. We know that this baby, Harry Potter, is super important in this world and will be super famous in this world. And Dumbledore is intentionally trying to keep him away from that. We know that he was recently orphaned, and we know that the Dursleys are the only family he has. We know that the Dursleys are really terrible people. And we know that something really significant has just happened in this magical world.
So we have a lot of questions.
We have heaps. J.J. Abrams did a TED Talk in 2007 where he talked about this idea of the mystery box. And this was sort of in context of him writing Lost, where there was always a question being asked. But whenever you got the answer to that question, you maybe got an answer, but you definitely got 3 more questions. I think that's kind of what this movie is doing. And people criticize J.J. Abrams for maybe not giving the best answers at the end of all of the questions he brings up, which I think in Lost is fair.
That's definitely fair.
But I think J.K. Rowling does a good job when, by the time you get to the later books, she's really starting to answer and solidify a lot of the stuff that we've been asking. But in the fact that they can do all of this curiosity building, let's call it, in the space of 3.5 minutes.
Because curiosity killed the cat.
It did kill the cat.
Hey.
I like that.
Title drop.
Yeah. But yeah, I think this idea of hinting towards more is something that is continual throughout the Harry Potter films. There's always more questions being raised. When Harry Potter flies his broom and gets put onto the Quidditch team, now we've got the question of, wait, what's Quidditch? Yes. And how big is Quidditch? Oh, it's really big? Oh, they have a World Cup. We get that answer in movie 6 or 7 or something. Hinting towards more, something they do really effectively.
Yeah, and it's using mythology we already know. So we're thrust into this fantasy world, but we know what wands are, we know what witches and wizards are, we know what cauldrons are. We haven't seen it in this context before. But it is actually quite accessible, and the idea that we start with the Dursleys as well means that we get magic in small doses.
Yeah, if you look at the sort of intro, the Dursleys section of the film, it kind of reminds you of a Roald Dahl story. You've got this kid who's living under the stairs, who's got this really aggressive or oppressive family, who isn't his real family, but they're who he lives with. Yeah, it's very similar to the story of Matilda. And what that does, I think, in terms of genre, that puts us in a really familiar space. It almost gives an easy, a soft takeoff to get into this fantasy genre. Because I can only imagine if you had started the film at Hogwarts, right, with Harry Potter arriving at Hogwarts, only someone who liked fantasy would go see that movie.
Be information overload. Even if Harry was still ignorant protagonist and had no idea what was going on, which is a great use of the ignorant protagonist, because we get to learn about the world through Harry. Starting with the Dursleys and starting in our world, we get to learn a lot more slowly. And like you said, there's so many questions. By the time he gets to Hogwarts, what is Hogwarts? Who is Dumbledore? What is going on? Please tell us.
Yeah, it makes you want the answers to those questions even more, which then means that any exposition that happens, we're okay with because, we're finally getting these answers to these questions we really want.
It doesn't feel like exposition at all.
No.
A movie that does do that is Ready Player One. You're just thrust into this dystopian world and you have the protagonist telling you through voiceover about the world. And it's just not the same because the moment you're there, he's just telling you what's going on, and it's not engaging, it's not interesting, not in the way this is.
Yeah, because we know that audiences can't deal with like massive dumps of exposition. Like it's just not fun. But this movie really manages to do the exposition well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So J.K. Rowling does something I haven't actually seen done anywhere else, at least not to this extent. And what inspired the idea for this podcast episode was I was rewatching Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and I realized for the first time how much time you get to spend just going to Hogwarts. There is so much time in Quidditch and in classes. And at the time I'm like, oh, there's so much like not plot relevant stuff. But that's not actually really how it works. So how it works is there are two stories. There's the school story, and this is the same from movies 1 to 6, and that kind of changes in the 7th. It's kind of all plot based. But movies 1 to 6, they have the school story and they have the mystery. So in the beginning of the films, we spend most of the time in the school story. And this is literally Harry just going to Hogwarts, learning what Hogwarts is, making friends. And the stakes feel really high because he's an 11-year-old boy. He's away from home. He wants to be a good wizard. He wants to fit in. He wants to make friends. There are enemies like Snape and Draco Malfoy. So not the big enemies like Voldemort. Small enemies, but they still feel real and they still feel like they pose a danger to Harry. And then there's the other plot, which is the mystery, which is the stone and Nicholas Flamel and Voldemort and all that stuff. So one of the things the movie does so cleverly is that it takes these two stories and it ties them together with the theme or the thematic question, which in the kind of world of Harry Potter, Harry is asking himself, am I a good wizard? Am I going to fit in? And that translates to what does it mean to be a good person? And J.K. Rowling's answer to that is friendship and bravery and love. She said, this is what you need to be a good wizard, good person. So let's take a scene, for example, the scene in potions class. So Harry's first potions class, he's still very new, he's diligently taking notes, and Snape is there being all Alan Rickman-y, and he's like, I can teach you how to snare the mind. And that's a terrible Alan Rickman. Alan Rickman.
I can teach you how to snare the mind. No, it's not great.
Anyway, Snape's being Snape. So what do we learn from this scene? Not a lot towards the mystery, but we learn that Harry is being a good wizard, he's taking notes, and we see that Snape's representing, to put it in quite basic terms, being a bad wizard, because he's talking about like things like fame and glory and all the power that magic can bring you. And of course we know that that's sort of a very Slytherin thing, and that's not what we want.
And in this movie, Slytherins are kind of the bad guys in terms of the school story. You know, we see that with the victory over the Slytherins at the end, right? Like that gets resolved.
So as the film goes on, though, it's not all just going to Hogwarts and exposition. The mystery starts to pick up, and the further we get into the film, the more the school story starts to drop out. And that kind of happens around the troll scene. And the troll scene is the midway point of the film. So it makes sense that from a story point of view, looking at the 3-act structure, I think if the film had done too much more of the school story and the world building, because it does take its time, right? It takes its time in the flying scene, it takes its time in the potion scene, it takes its time in the sorting scene. But I think if we'd had too much more of that, we would have started to get bored. Yes. Because we had kind of had enough of the questions being answered. And I think one of the reasons it works, for me at least, is that answering these questions and doing this exposition through these school scenes, in a way, is actually character development for Harry. Because, you know, we know he's meant to be a famous wizard. And as you said, he's trying to be a good wizard. He's trying to figure out what that means. So anytime he's in a class, anytime he is learning about magic or the magical world, we are seeing him engage with that part of his character. And so we're seeing his character develop because we know he's meant to be something really big in the wizarding world. Yeah, and he keeps meeting characters that show him things he doesn't have. So he meets Ron, and Ron comes from a family of wizards. And he meets Hermione, and Hermione is automatically very smart and already knows spells. And then he meets Draco Malfoy, and that's kind of representing, to be a wizard, you should be powerful and you should tower above other people. So yeah, so we hit the troll scene, and we get to the end of the troll scene, and he's made friends with Ron and Hermione. And some of the
they kind of make friends with Hermione in that scene, and I think that's what progresses it, because Hermione kind of does everything in all the movies. Like in terms of, she's the most useful one for
definitely
plot and figuring out the mystery element.
Yeah, and the nice moment of friendship isn't just defeating the troll. It's when Hermione lies to McGonagall to protect Ron and Harry. And there's this really nice moment, and that's when they bond. So we're like, okay, Harry's fit in at Hogwarts, he's doing well, he knocked a troll unconscious, he's got friends, and then we start bringing in more and more of the mystery. So for example, like a great school scene is the Quidditch game. Pure school until we think that Snape is trying to curse Harry's broomstick, and in comes the mystery, and in comes the danger.
And Hermione being the useful one to set his
Hermione
cloak on
being the
fire.
useful one. So compare this to like an earlier scene. It's very early on, I think it's Seamus Finnegan is reading from a newspaper that the vault that Harry visited with Hagrid earlier on, the contents have been stolen. It's like, oh no, mystery plot. And then immediately it's back into school plot.
Yeah.
So we hit full mystery is when they go under the trapdoor and they start completing all the challenges. And that ends with the answer to the mystery plot. Spoilers, I guess, but you should really know the ending by now.
If you're listening to this podcast.
Voldemort and Quirrell, same person. And going back to the thematic question of what does it mean to be a good wizard, Quirrell says, I can bring your parents back. And it's interesting because the theme of Harry Potter is love, and that's a very twisted form of love.
And we've seen that this is like the most deep desire of Harry's heart through the Mirror of Erised.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Harry says no, he's brave, he's loyal, and then Quirrell crumbles because of the love of Harry's mother, and he touches Harry. So that answers that question. But the movie's not over, because we haven't finished the school plot. So how we finish the school plot, we're in the Great Hall, and Gryffindor wins the House Cup. And how does Gryffindor win? By Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Neville winning points. Yeah. They triumph over Slytherin, and they win for friendship, loyalty, and bravery, and love.
Yeah.
And then we get the final scene of the movie, which ties it all together thematically, which is Harry saying, I'm not going home, not really, because Hogwarts is his home. He's found his home. He found where he belongs.
Which is a thing we find, from the very start of the movie.
Yeah, he's looking for a place to fit in.
You have a point about the way they introduce locations.
Yeah, so again, I haven't seen this done in a lot of films. Something the world has been searching for a long time is the next Harry Potter, and what will be the next Harry Potter. By the way, John August has a podcast called Launch, which is kind of about this and publishing kids' books, so if you're interested in that, it's a good podcast to check out. But the closest that's kind of been to the next Harry Potter is Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson series. Similar setup, kids start about 12, they grow up to be 17, 18. Instead of wizards and witches, it's Greek mythology as the basis. And it's done really well, and it's really popular, and it's very well done, but it just hasn't reached that level of fandom that Harry Potter has.
I think with that though, Percy Jackson is just part of the charm of Harry Potter, and part of the reason the fandom can really grasp it is like anyone can be a wizard, and you can not know you're a wizard and then suddenly be invited into this world. Whereas with Percy Jackson, it's kind of like there's select people, right? Like who
that's true.
Kind of have they're like demigods essentially.
They're demigods, and it's kind of set up that anyone can be a demigod a little bit, because Percy doesn't know he's one.
No, but so you still got the thing of you could not know you are one.
Yeah.
But there's not the charming wizarding world, right? Where there's like a whole community and society that exists separate. It's kind of like this very secret, like they've got a training camp, I think, for the Percy Jackson
it's a
thing.
camp, and it's not Hogwarts. And I think one of the things Percy Jackson doesn't do nearly as well as Harry Potter is use of location. Percy Jackson, going on the idea of Greek mythology, so it does fit what Rick Riordan's trying to do. It's a lot of them are quests in the style of the Odyssey.
Yeah.
The second book is basically the Odyssey, told for modern audiences. But what Harry Potter does is each book and film, we get a few more locations, but we revisit the locations we know again and again and again. So in the first movie, it's Hogwarts, obviously. And J.K. Rowling does a very clever thing where she'll always describe certain things the same way. So I'm thinking the Gryffindor common room is warm and cozy. And every time we get to the Gryffindor common room, it's warm and cozy. We know about the dungeons. We know that the Great Hall is vast and inviting. And we get to go to these places all the time. And then in the second book, we get to go to the Burrow, which is the Weasley's house. Third book, we get Hogsmeade and Azkaban as well, as kind of talked about.
We also get the Forbidden Forest in the first movie.
Yes.
And then that's revisited very frequently throughout.
Yeah, book 5, we get the Ministry of Magic and St. Mungo's Hospital. And these things just build and build and build. So you can think of it as a world that's expanding, almost like you're a video game, and the more locations you visit, the map gets wider. Yeah. But you always, return to home. Hogwarts is home for Harry. It's home base. So there's a good balance of familiarity going into each film.
Yeah.
We know where we're going. We know Hagrid's hut. We know the Gryffindor common room.
And I feel like it's not only locations that the movie does that with, like the series as a whole, but also items. Like things like Polyjuice Potion, right? We get the Polyjuice Potion in the second movie when they have to use it, and Hermione becomes a cat. And
still looks better than the Cats trailer.
That's amazing. But then that becomes really important later on when the Order of the Phoenix have to get Harry out of Pivot Drive really safely. It becomes a real major plot point for Barty Crouch Jr. when he's impersonating Mad-Eye Moody. And Snape even accuses Harry of having stolen the ingredients for Polyjuice Potion. During that scene, he then introduces... I can't remember what it's called, but it's essentially like a truth serum thing.
Veritaserum.
That one.
Harry Potter nerd.
Which then comes back in the next movie when Cho Chang has been interrogated by Umbridge using that serum. And so it's these small things that, you know, you build on top of each other that just kind of add to the world. And by the time you get to the 7th movie, you've just got this massive... world of items and locations
and characters.
So
another thing I was really impressed with rewatching the first one, I realized how many characters they introduce who aren't plot important but will be later. So even like smaller characters like Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas, Pansy Parkinson, who will become slightly more important later, but they just flesh out the world. And I think that's another thing of like keeping it to a limited location. You do know all your classmates, you do know all your teachers.
And it's that idea of hinting at more again, right? Like bring it around. We get little snippets of someone or something. You know, we see Gringotts, and then it comes back later on in maybe number 8? 7 or 8? 7? One of the Deathly Hallows.
I think they like get there at the end of movie 7, and then they're like there at the beginning of movie 8.
If we were true Harry Potter nerds, we'd know this.
I was never as big a fan of the last 2 movies. I think because they do the travelling quest. And they're not in familiar locations. I still like it, and I still love the 7th book. It's not quite the same.
And this isn't to knock the travelling quest.
Oh, no, not at all.
Percy Jackson is great. The Lord of the Rings trilogy is a travelling quest. But there is something to be said for how a fandom can be created and how an immersive world can be created by staying true to your locations and staying true to the places you establish. And I think when you know you're going in for a series as well, especially, that becomes way more important. And I think Harry Potter knows that it's going to be a series, and that plays really to its benefit because it can spend so much of the first movie establishing what that series is going to be about.
Without dumping all the world on you at once. It's very well spread out. Like, we don't find out about things like Thestrals until book 5. We find out about Patronuses and Dementors book 3 and Azkaban. A mistake I do, not a mistake, but a problem I find a lot of first-time writers have, especially those in the fantasy genre, is they have hundreds of pages of notes on their world and they just don't know how to start. Because they want to tell you everything about the world. And I'm sure they're amazing worlds. But just take a page out of J.K. Rowling's book. It's fine. Take your time.
I find that when I create the D&D world for our campaign that I run, I'll spend hours and hours when I should be just preparing the like 2-hour session that we're going to have. I'm spending hours and hours just creating the world. And because world building's fun, and
it is very fun,
and there is a real element of you've built this thing and you want to reveal it, but you look at how much stuff got revealed about the Harry Potter world, you know, with varying levels of criticism by J.K. Rowling after all the movies and books had been finished.
Oh yeah, and there's more, you know, and there can always be more.
And now we've got the Fantastic Beasts series, and so we're seeing the American wizarding world.
Yes.
Right? And so establishing yourself like this, establishing yourself with just hints, but never giving it all at once, it saves your audience from just being worn out by exposition, but also just gives you space to keep expanding.
And always coming back to your theme. So a nice thing about all the Harry Potter world is it's always kind of built around like love and happiness. Like the Dementors are a symbol for depression, and she's built a lot around like Nazi Germany and drawing from real life history and what it means to succeed in those kinds of worlds. Keeping that in mind as well. I had one more point. It's a short point, but it's an important point. And my point is titled Harry's Wondrous World, which is one of John Williams' most famous pieces for the soundtrack. And we're allowed to wonder at the world. And again, that's not something I see a lot of. Usually they get thrown into this world and it's dangerous and they're scared. And it's one of the few things as well where they not ignore, but they kind of skip over the refusal of the call in the hero's journey. There's no point where Harry's like, I don't want to go to Hogwarts. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. Which again, works well in a lot of other texts, just not this one. His refusal of the call is more like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. As opposed to, I don't really want to be here. But there's that wonderful scene where Hagrid takes Harry to Diagon Alley and they're just strolling through Diagon Alley and everything's magical and wonderful and the music is playing.
And I even think about every time they go to, is it Hogsmeade?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Like, you just think about the music that plays in those times. It's always this happy, wondrous, it's almost Christmas kind of music. Like, it's just, I love that. It's the sense of wonder.
The first moment where Harry walks into the Great Hall in the first one is still one of my favourite scenes ever because it's just so magical and wonderful, even though you can see the wires on viewing, but it's not important. So and Hogwarts is dangerous and exciting, but it's fun, and it's a place where Harry makes very meaningful connections with both his peers and his teachers, and he finds like parental figures around him as well. He finds love. That's what the whole series is about. It's about love.
So in summary, 1, hint towards more.
Hint towards more, yes.
2, start with something that's familiar and build, whether it be genre that's familiar and then moving into sort of more extreme genres, or starting with a world that's familiar before moving into a world that's unfamiliar. 3, where you can, take time to build the story, but do it in a way that's not going to be exposition dumping. Yeah,
and keep the stakes in that story. Like the school story as well. Like, have your protagonist need to make friends, make connections.
Yeah, character first.
Character first.
Use the ignorant character.
Yes. It's much more interesting if we get to grow and travel with the main character. And it can even be someone from that world, like Frodo in Lord of the Rings is from Middle-earth, but he doesn't know much about outside the Shire, and we get to learn with Frodo.
Yeah.
So keeping that in mind as well.
Expand rather than travel.
Yeah, so returning to familiar locations, and it's more of a novel thing, but to describe those locations in the same way. But in the films, you could be shooting those scenes in similar ways every time we come back to that scene.
Well, I mean, every time we come back to the Great Hall, we always start with what's the weather in the Great Hall like, what's the roof doing, and then we come down.
Lots of wide shots, we see everything. Fun fact, I've been to the set of the Great Hall, and it is also amazing in person.
It was just as magical?
Not quite, but still pretty magical.
That's fair.
Harry Potter nerd and movie nerd at the same time. And the last one is, have a world where you're allowed to wonder at it. It doesn't always have to be scary and dangerous. There's allowed to be magic and excitement in there as well. Bonus points if your world could be real. Hogwarts could be real.
Yeah, we're just muggles, so we don't know.
J.K. Rowling could be a witch that wrote about it.
There is a fan theory that I read today about this.
Oh yeah?
The fan theory is that J.K. Rowling is Rita Skeeter.